Hey everybody, Economic Ninja here. I hope you are doing well. I have got Eric from Sage News on. We're going to be talking about Union Pacific. We're going to be talking about fertilizer, all kinds of things, because a company has come out and said that Union Pacific is halting their ability to ship out the needed fertilizer to farmers right now in a peak growing season. Without further ado, Eric, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Awesome,
You always seem to get a hold of me when we're in some distress here immediately, but that's a good thing. So yeah, it was funny. I looked at the same one and I'm like, the next thing I know, I'm like, beep, hey, okay, perfect. So yeah, we've got some fertilizer on top of everything else. We might have some fertilizer, but it's not this time. It's not actually the fertilizer shortage. It's the supply of getting fertilizer to people, that supply chain issue, which is becoming a common word in households nowadays. And at one time, I had a very boring life. And recently, it's become a lot more hectic with a lot more questions. And I'm here to give some answers. So that being said, I'm going to share the screen here.
All right.
Let me take this. All right. And let me go like this. Perfect. So basically what we have is the fertilizer company says Union Pacific limits will hurt farmers. So basically what the article goes into, and you guys, this is from Transport Topics. You can kind of pull this one up. It's from April 15th if you want to check it out. But what it goes into is that Union Pacific has decided to not use so many private cars. So rails use different cars. They use their own cars, which, if you drive by and you'll see the, UP on it, that's their cars. And then you have, probably, different chemical companies, not probably, but different chemical companies own their own cars also. Schneider might own their own. And then you have third parties, complete third parties that, lease these cars to people. Rail cars, I mean. So what Union Pacific has decided to do is take the privately owned ones, not their own, but the privately owned ones, and basically kick back on some of them that they're going to take. They're not going to ship as many of them. They're going to say, hey, we're full. And it's all stemming from supply chain issues. They don't have enough to keep up. Yep. And they're basically trying to knee-jerk reaction this situation to cater to either other aspects that still has to move or things like that. So they're actually pulling back on shipping fertilizer. Now, is this the best idea in the situation right now? I don't think so, but it's one of those that I think we're seeing some poor management in regards to decision-making on an overloaded supply chain issue as we already have.
Yep. So now I want to remind people that this is coming on the backs of a labor, I wouldn't say dispute with Union Pacific, but months ago, there was issues where a lot of people working for the railroad were complaining about really horrible work hours and all kinds of things with the union the actual railroad, and the railroad is having a hard time getting enough employees to run these trains, to service the trains, to service the rails. I mean, there is literally a deficit right now of qualified employees for the company. And so this is one way that they're deciding to try and help that situation. Wouldn't you agree, Eric?
Yeah, and that was back when we did the BNSF basically was having a new attendance policy that came out, and it was a big deal, and it was causing a lot of those drivers to leave and to quit and to find work elsewhere, as in, they don't want to deal with this attendance policy. And so we're starting to see these effects in regards to the supply chain with the rail system. Now that we have, they're limited on the amount of people that are working, they're limited to the amount of cars they can get loaded and unloaded, and it's becoming a big deal. So what's going to happen is a couple things. As these supply chains, people that fertilizer shipped in early, like you buy your fertilizer in the fall and the winter, the big companies do, and they stock up on that, right? Well, the medium companies and the smaller companies might wait and try to find the best price, but the price never came down for fertilizer. So what's going to happen basically is as fertilizer gets harder to get shipped, we're going to have a problem with inflation of the price of fertilizer, right? Because it's just going to be a supply and demand situation. And when, the demand is there, but they're not given the supply, that drives the price up. So the farmers are the ones, like it said in this article, that are going to be paying the price because they're going to have to pay extra money to get that fertilizer delivered from other sources, or just eventually wait on it. And either way, it's going to affect food prices in the end.
Yeah, and I got to correct myself. You're right, Eric. That was the BNSF issue that was coming to light. But right here, I found an article from Inside Track, and it says help wanted, growth means Union Pacific is hiring. And this is back in December. Union Pacific was also going through an issue where they're having a hard time getting qualified employees. And so that means that they can only run so many trains at once. Yeah, so it is really interesting because I could throw a little bit of my background in dealing with hazardous materials and learning a little bit about rail operations. A lot of companies own their own cars and third parties own their cars that they lease out because Union Pacific doesn't want to be in the business of hauling hazardous materials. There's so much government red tape when it comes to the cleaning, the handling, and all of that kind of stuff. Union Pacific wants to just, back up, hook up, and go, right? They're the transportation company. They're not in the business of really owning a ton of cars where they've got to service these specialized cars like pressurized dome cars and all these. I'm just throwing out different types of hazardous materials that are in these different cars with fertilizer, fuel, things like that. So when they start talking about cutting the fat, that's one of the ways to cut fat. Because would you agree, Eric, that a Union Pacific could probably get more bang for their buck hauling their own cars as opposed to a third party?
Oh, absolutely. That their own cars and possibly hauling stuff that might not be hazard material. Right now, if you had a bunch of containers that had to get off the port and that's paying top dollar, well, that's kind of where these businesses are going to cater to that higher dollar and that higher movement. So to make that happen, they're having to, cut this and cut that because right now it's more profitable with their own cars to haul their own stuff. And that's what I believe it stems from. They don't have the means to be able to get this done with the amount of, volume of freight that we have. So they're making hard choices. And FedEx, even one time, they cut like 1,500 customers. Remember, we covered that story that they cut 1,500 customers because they couldn't handle all the stuff was coming in. And I think this is another one of that type of moves. You cut, just like you said, the most liability out of if you don't need to have that liability.
Yeah, so let's talk about some cause and reaction, some outcomes of this. One thing is that if there's less fertilizer moving, that means it's going to get tight. The supply is going to get tight, regardless if the fertilizer is sitting at the plant. If you can't get it to the people, it's like selling a gallon of milk and not having the plastic carton. And I literally remember seeing those videos of semi trucks full of milk just backing up in a field and dumping the milk because they literally didn't have the plastic containers. So the question is, or the fact is, prices are going to go up. So what's one thing we could do is buy fertilizer. If you need fertilizer, grab it now, right?
Right, because if this fertilizer is going to get moved, it's just not going to get moved by rail, the cheapest method to move it. Yep. So the next method to move that's going to be truck. So when it moves by truck, it's going to be more expensive to move because, one train can do about 150 truckloads, right? So now we got 150 trucks that now have to move that. So we're not looking at a stoppage of it. We're looking at it's no longer going to cost, let's use simple numbers, $5. It could cost $7 or $8 to move it because of the truck and the more trucks that have to move it. So we're really looking at a price factor here.
Now, let's talk about ever-changing scenarios too, because I just did a story about how freight shipping semi-trucks, the cost of per mile shipping just fell off a cliff last month. It was like 26% down month over month. And that was because there's just simply less freight to haul. Now, this is an interesting dynamic where this could actually cause freight prices to go up. And it sounds funny because my subscribers know this. They understand that this is an evolving, day by day changing environment. I was talking about how those dollars, per mile were dropping, but this could literally cause it to spike because a bunch of operators would go, hey, you know what? I can start shipping fertilizer, like you said with the trains. We go with whatever pays the best, right?
Right. And that's where, like I said, if it's something that has to go in a tanker, the tankers are going to jump on that. But if it's something that can be loaded in a van, can be loaded, it can be palletized and things like that, that's going to drive that industry to look for other means to be able to ship it, which would be truck.
And I want people to realize this too, when you're dealing with shipping of hazardous materials, it really, one thing it comes down to, it's the hazardous material, that's number one, but it's also the quantity of it being shipped. People think that you have to have it in a specific container and have it placarded like crazy because it's hazardous, but the facts are it comes down to the amount being shipped. If you start shipping things in smaller quantities, you don't have to do the whole, certain types of containers, certain types of placarding and all that kind of stuff. However, that does drive the price up very significantly.
Right. It's 1,001 pounds of most materials. I mean, unless you're hauling something like explosives or mercury, that don't matter. But we'll get back to the fertilizer. That would be 1,001 pounds, basically, once you break that cusp. So it is something that, like I said, it's going to be shipped. The thing for everybody to be aware of is that price is going to be higher. So if you have a means to be able to get, let's say, natural fertilizer some way, that might be, something that you look into. If not, and you're doing small farm, or you're doing it, even down to your personal one, it's something that grab it when you can from places you can. Think outside the box. You'd be shocked that, the dollar store might have something that, you can put natural fertilizers, things like that you might be able to snag up. It's just adapting to the problems, right? What survives the longest is your ability to adapt to situations, right? It's not always strong with the fittest, but it's the ability to adapt.
Well, and I believe that's what separates successful people from unsuccessful people.
Correct.
So well said, Eric. Is there anything you want to close on right now?
No, I'm just still shooting for the 15K. You've helped me out immensely, and I do appreciate that, but we're getting there slowly but surely.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, if you haven't seen Eric at Sage News, please check out his YouTube channel. Again, that is Sage News. Eric has all kinds of great info. He's been helping this channel out, so I really always want to help him out as well. So thanks again, Eric. I really appreciate you coming on.
No problem. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, guys, with that being said, the Economic Ninja is out.